we're just coming up to 7:30. So as people kind of come in from the waiting room, we'll get started. It's wonderful to have you all here with us this evening. Thank you for coming to hear a little bit more about the JPIT internships, what they involve, what opportunities are available to work with the Joint Public Issues team, and what the application process is like. So our time together this evening, we'll spend thinking through what the internships are, what opportunities they offer, what is involved in the day-to-day of the roles. And we've got a number of people here with us this evening from the JPIT team who'll be popping up on your screens throughout the evening to share a little bit of their experiences of the internships, including our current interns, and then some other team members as well, to find out a little bit more about what it's like to have interns in the team and the recruitment process. My name's Hannah, and I work as part of the Joint Public Issues team in the Methodist team. So throughout our time together this evening, we've got a chance for you guys to ask questions as well. We want to make this really useful for you if you're thinking about applying to the webinar, to the internships. And so at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A button. And that's the button we'll use to ask questions throughout the evening. So you can use that to submit your questions, and we will answer them as we go. So please, as you think of questions, if you've got a question that comes up in response to something someone's shared, please do put those in as we go, and we will answer those throughout the evening, and then have a little bit of time at the end to ask any final questions as well. And you can ask those questions anonymously if you'd like, so you can choose to either have your name against the question or to submit your question anonymously as well. And if it gets to the end of our time together and you log off and you think, oh, that's a question I really should have asked, or if there's a question you'd like to ask us directly, then you can get in touch with the team at our inquiries email address, which is inquiries@jpit.uk. And we'll just pop that in the chat for you now so you can see that written down. So if you have any questions after this evening's webinar is finished, please do email us and we will do our best to answer them. That's been just for people who are just joining us as well. Thank you so much for joining, and we're just sharing that throughout the evening we'll have Q&A that you can ask through the Q&A button at the bottom bar of your screen, and please do ask questions as we go. Brilliant. So we've got a couple of different internship opportunities available with JPIT, and we're going to talk about those this evening. As you might have seen already, we're currently in the kind of open recruitment process for our JPIT intern, our full-time intern role with the Joint Public Issues team. And that applications are currently open for that role. And we also host 2 parliamentary interns within the team who work part-time with the Joint Public Issues team and part-time with an MP in Parliament. And we're hoping to open recruitment for those in the coming weeks. So we'll talk about both of those roles throughout our conversation this evening. So to get us started, I'm going to pass over to Hazel, and Hazel, Simeon and I are going to have a little conversation about what it's like to work for the Joint Public Issues team. So over to you, Hazel.
Great, thanks so much, Hannah. And yeah, just to reiterate, please do drop your questions in the question and answer section. If you have any specific questions for Hannah and Simeon that I haven't asked them, please do just drop those and I will do my best to ask them as part of this conversation. If not, we'll get to them at the end. Yeah, as Hannah said, I'm Hazel. I'm currently the full-time JPIT intern. So really excited to be hosting this little section of tonight. So we're going to start by kind of talking a bit about JPIT as a team, what we do and how we operate. And I didn't have much information about how the team worked before I arrived, so I think it'll be really helpful for you to hear a bit more about how that works. So Simeon, can we start with you? Could you tell us a little bit about kind of what we do, how we structure our work and how we work within our denominations?
Certainly. Shall I say who I am as well? So I'm Simeon, and I'm currently the team leader of the Joint Public Issues team, and I work within the United Reformed Church as their Secretary for Church and Society. And that gives you a clue as to one of the ways that we work, which is we work ecumenically across 3 church denominations. So we are a shared team. The URC, the Baptist Union of Great Britain, or Baptist Together, and the Methodist Church in Britain came together about 15 years ago and decided that all of our work around, or as far as possible, the work of those 3 denominations around political engagement, working for justice and peace on public issues, should be done collaboratively and should be done jointly. So we're a team of 10 of us, employed by those 3 different denominations, but working together as one team to try and influence the world, try and change the world, and bring about changes which our churches are kind of advocating for, but also to resource all the churches within those denominations in their thinking about some of the biggest issues facing society and their engagement around those issues. So that's what we try and do.
Great, thanks, Simeon. And Hannah, can you tell us maybe a bit about the areas that we choose to work in as churches?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have we kind of shape our work around what we call our 6 hopes for society, and they're 6 kind of focus areas that as denominations we've decided to work on together. They might not necessarily cover every justice issue that we care about or are passionate about as people of Christian faith, but they are 6 areas where we feel like we can make a real difference by working together. So I won't run you through all 6 now. You can go and find out a little bit more about those on the JPIT website. But they cover everything from poverty in the UK to refugees to democracy and engaging with the political process. So they're big picture visions for society. They kind of encourage us to think forward about what change we'd like to see, as well as the challenges that we feel like we're facing. And they're a really good way of helping us to keep our focus on what some of the big issues of justice and peace are kind of facing the world at the moment and how we might be able to make a difference on them.
Great, thanks, Hannah. And we've talked a bit about that we work across 3 denominations. How does that look practically? Hannah, do you want to just take that one to start with?
Yeah, so as Simeon said, we're the United Reformed Church, the Baptist Union, and the Methodist Church, all kind of pooling our resources around that, around these issues. And part of that means that each of those denominations have staff who work for that denomination, but are appointed to kind of work with JPIT. I think one of the helpful ways that I kind of understand it is that we wear kind of 2 hats. We sit within our denominations, but then we also sit within the Joint Public Issues team. So for me, I work in the Methodist part of the JPIT team, and that means day to day I interact with colleagues across the Methodist Church, as well as with our ecumenical colleagues within the Joint Public Issues team. And for Simeon, that might look similar in terms of your space in the United Reformed Church, as well as working ecumenically within the JPIT team. So we're very much a close team in terms of we work together as colleagues, even though we work for different organisations as such. But we kind of work in that slightly distinctive way.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And where do the interns kind of fit in? I mean, I'm sure I can say a few things, but Simeon, how do you see the interns fitting in to that kind of dynamic?
Well, the interns are a vital part of our team. As I mentioned, there's 10 of us in total. So you can imagine three of the 10 are interns. So it makes a big difference to the feel of the team that we have new people coming in every year. One of the great things I think about being an intern with the team, you'll perhaps tell me, Hazel, whether this is true or not, is that you get to work across the whole range of different issues that the team's working on, because the interns sort of add capacity to our team, and they are involved in projects that the team's running on all sorts of different issues, and also work across the 3 denominations. Although the 3 interns sit within the Methodist Church from an employment point of view and sit within the Methodist kind of office and follow the Methodist HR processes, they very much work across all 3 of the churches and make a huge difference to our work. And you'll hear a bit more later on, I think, about the kind of work that you might be involved in as interns. But I suppose the other really important thing to say is that interns are full members of the team. They're full staff members, and they fully contribute to all of our discussions and our decision making as a team as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can testify to that personally as well. I think something that I've really appreciated about working for the team is that it hasn't felt like the interns are always the ones making the coffee or, doing the kind of menial tasks. It is, you're very much a full part of the team and able to kind of bring your own ideas and your own kind of personal passions to the table, as well as engaging with the work that's already going on. Great. So we talked a bit more about practicalities. Hannah, do you want to just talk a little bit about kind of what the dynamics are like and maybe how the interns contribute to that dynamic as a team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably one of the ways that we work most often is quite project-based working. Under those kind of 6 hopes that we talked about, there might be a specific project or a campaign or a resource that we're creating that focuses on one of those areas. And so often what we'll have is people in the team who perhaps have a particular specialism on that area or a particular skill to offer to what we're trying to resource, coming together with others around the team where there's capacity and availability to work on a piece of work and working together collaboratively to produce that. So for example, we might be producing a campaign to get people to take an action to write to their MP. And we might work collaboratively with somebody who's got some policy expertise on that area, somebody who's thinking about the church engagement side of it and what resources we might offer to churches, and somebody who's doing the communications side of that. So I think it's quite an active dynamic in the team. We're often kind of working collaboratively to produce something or to think through a particular issue or topic. And those people might be drawn from each of the denominations. And I think having online working and having Zoom has really helped us as a team work really collaboratively on some of those things. So it's not just the person you're sat next to in the office, but actually working across the team on those issues and asking each other questions and drawing on different people's expertise. And I'd say we probably have an intern across most of our areas of work. So towards the beginning of the year, we usually sit down and look at the work plan and think with our interns who are incoming, what would you like to work on this year? Where would you like to learn something? Is there a particular opportunity you'd be interested in? But then also, where can we really add that valuable capacity that the interns bring to different pieces of work throughout the year and add something into those different teams working on specific projects.
I'll just throw something else in about the kind of dynamics of the team. It's very rarely dull because one of the joys of this kind of work is it's responding to what's going on in the world and what's going on in the news and what's going on in Parliament. So there's always new issues. And one of the joys of the team is that we meet together every week, at least every fortnight in person. And very often our agenda will be partly about this thing's happening, this thing's going on, this report's come out. How are we going to respond? How are we going to help our churches in thinking about that issue? So there's a lot of conversation and discernment going on in our team meetings, and a lot of responding to the latest issues, which I think means you never feel that you've got everything done, but it's also keeps it really interesting and lively.
Yeah, no 2 weeks are ever the same at JPIT, I've found, and it might be that you might have some regular things that are in our weeks, like our team meetings, but a new issue might pop up because the government have made a statement on a particular issue, or there's a new piece of legislation that's arrived. And I've found one of the real joys of working in an environment where you're looking at so many different issues or so many different social justice issues and political areas, is that you really get an experience of what it's like to work across different environments and different contexts within those different sectors, but as well as looking at those specific policy issues.
Great, yeah, thanks both. I just wondered, Hannah, these roles are hybrid roles. Do you want to explain a bit more what that means kind of practically to how you operate with the team as one of the interns?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Simeon said, the 3 interns, whilst they're kind of working across with all of the denominations and working across the breadth of JPIT's areas, are sat within the Methodist Connectional Team, is what it's called, the kind of staff team for the Methodist Church. And currently all of our staff roles are hybrid roles. So that means that we do have an in-person office based in Westminster that you can book to come and work at a hot desk. And all hybrid roles are expected to be in that office at least 2 days out of 5 in the working week, or a proportion of that if you're part-time, like our parliamentary interns are. And then the rest of the days you can choose whether to work in the office or to work from home or a different location. So the roles being advertised as hybrid are kind of stating that as an expectation that you'll be in a minimum of 2 days. You could be in a maximum of 5. But generally it reflects quite a culture in the office, but also across each of the denominations actually, that most of the team are home-based some of the week and office-based other days. So lots of our meetings are online, but also some of our meetings are in person as well, and there's that chance for kind of face-to-face interaction with people too.
Yeah, and it's something I think is really, really helpful to have that flexibility as well. Sometimes I'll prefer to work from home just because it's practically easier for whatever reason for that day. But I really value the ability to kind of come in and be around people and be in that environment where you can just chat to someone and you can work on whatever you're doing with that atmosphere of working going on. Yeah, well, thank you both so much. It's been really great to chat a bit about that, a bit more about the big picture. And then I'm going to invite Ru on, who's going to ask me a few questions about the JPIT internship, I believe.
Yes, indeed. So, hi everyone. I'm Ru. I work with the United Reformed Church, the URC, as their program officer for church and society. And I've been working with JPIT since 2018. So, it's coming up on 5 years. And Hazel, you have been in your role for about 8 months, actually more than 8 months now. So, you are the best, most qualified person to tell us what it's actually like in this role. Now, just before we start, I'm seeing a few questions have come in on our Q&A, so keep those questions coming in, and we'll answer. There's one in particular I think we'll answer a little bit later on, because that'll be something we'll deal with in the next part, or a couple of parts down in our program for tonight. And if there's short answers we can give, we might just type them. If there's longer answers that we need, then just hang on and we'll try and respond to those verbally. But if you have any questions in particular for Hazel, as our JPIT intern at the moment, that would be absolutely fantastic. Fire those in and I'll try and feed those questions over to Hazel. Put her on the spot. See if there's any really tricky questions you can ask her, catch her out. I don't think you will, because Hazel's just been great. So Hazel, over to you. Can you tell us very briefly, what is it like in a week in the life of the JPIT intern?
Great. I mean, I think something Hannah said earlier really rings true for this role, is that no 2 weeks is ever the same, but even a day can be very different and very varied just within that day. I think practically the way that my work kind of splits itself is that I have some work which is very much ongoing, and it's the kind of same structure every week. So that's things like I will record the podcast with the Politics in the Pulpit podcast. I will make and schedule the prayer for the day each day. I will kind of check our inquiries emails. I'll check our Twitter and our Facebook kind of messages, and just make sure that those people who've got in touch with us as a team have been responded to. So those are kind of the ongoing things that happen every week. But within that, as Hannah said, we have a lot of project-based work. So I'm involved with several different projects at one time. So a week might involve, I mean, today I was preparing for a speaking engagement, which I'm doing in York next weekend. I was also writing a blog for a conference that's coming up. It might involve kind of contributing to a resource that we're producing as a team, like a briefing or a web page. It might just be making graphics for social media for a different event we've got coming up. But yeah, it's very varied, and also attending meetings and all that kind of stuff is basically what I get involved with.
Fab. It sounds like there are some things that are kind of regular things that need to happen pretty much every week, and then there's an awful lot of difference then every week as well. So I don't think there's really time to get bored. But how many hours do you actually work, Hazel? It sounds like you're working like every minute of the day. How do you manage to fit it all in?
We work from 9 until 5 pretty practically from Monday to Friday. So yes, that's plenty of time, but also plenty of time not at work. And I get an hour for lunch every day. So it's a nice balance.
So for people who are maybe not familiar with London in the southeast, it's really lovely to be sort of in London and to experience all the joys that London can bring as well. You're not just stuck in an office all the time, but there's time to go and explore and do all the Monopoly squares, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, sounds like a very busy but very fulfilling role. And I guess like if you're working on a Saturday going up to York, you'll get a bit of time off the next week or something. So we're not overworking you. You're working the right number of hours, but you're managing to fit it all in. It's awesome. You're doing such a great job. Tell us a little bit about who you work with. So you've talked a little bit about the team and the structure of the Joint Public Issues team, but there's a whole lot of people that you sort of communicate with. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those characters, some of those people, what that's like?
Sure. I mean, yeah, as you say, I work with pretty much all of the team on some level, whether that's recording a podcast with or kind of organizing a specific piece of work with. Yeah, I work with pretty much everyone on the team. But also beyond that, the permanent kind of full-time intern with JPIT is the first point of contact for most of kind of our external communications. So that's things like church leaders I will have contact with, just people that go to one of our churches, so just church members, whether they're kind of asking specific questions about maybe the situation that they find themselves in, or they've got a new member of the congregation who's maybe a refugee and they want some support with how to kind of respond to them. So everything from that to kind of other organizations as well. I've done some work over this year with Hope for the Future, who are an environmental justice charity, who aren't a Christian charity, but we had a real crossover in a lot of the work we were doing. So I've also kind of liaised with them and worked with them. So
it's a ton of people to keep in your brain. Yeah, it's great. You're quite a people person as well, Hazel, and I think you're quite bubbly, which really helps whenever someone calls up and asks a difficult question. I think you're a safe pair of hands for us to think Hazel will either know the answer or she will be able to help them to find the right answer. So I think that's a really positive thing that people can bring to the role. So thank you for what you do in that, Hazel. Are there any surprises? You came into the role with expectations, and hopefully we've fulfilled and given you the opportunity to fulfill most of those expectations already. And there'll be more to come, I'm sure. But, are there any things that have just completely surprised you that you just did not expect would be part of the role?
Yeah, I think one kind of broad answer would just be there's a lot of responsibility. It's not kind of like what I said earlier, you're not just the one expected to make a cup of tea for everyone. You are fully contributing and given a lot of I think increasingly I've been given some kind of creative control over some of the stuff I've been doing, which is really great. And like I said, you're really able to kind of bring your own passions and your own interests to the table. So I think that's one of the things that's kind of surprised me, of being like, oh, I'm really grateful that I've been able to really bring my own voice and my own interests to the team. I think one of the things that surprised me perhaps is quite how many opportunities I've got to maybe learn more of a specific skill. So things like podcasting, I had no experience in before I started this role. I listened to podcasts, but I've never, been on one or produced one. And this role, I've produced the Politics in the Pulpit podcast, and also been a host and a guest on our other podcast, 10 Minutes On, several times, which I've really enjoyed doing. And it's been something that at the start of the year, I would have been like, I have no idea how to do that, but now I feel really comfortable with doing that. So yeah, I think it's grown my skill set in ways that I was not expecting it to, which is
brilliant.
great.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. We don't often have these kind of conversations. It's only usually whenever we're doing webinars like this. So it's really nice to hear that, Hazel. It's really exciting. One final kind of question then. So you've been growing your skill set practically and with various different technological skills that you now have and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about your faith and maybe how your faith has grown or been stretched by what you've been doing? What's been your spiritual experience through being in this role?
I think before I started this role, I was someone who really cared about justice and was also a person of faith. And I think those things were very much kind of married together in my experience of being a Christian. I'd really grown in that kind of in the years leading up to this role. I think something that spiritually I've really seen this year is just learning how it's not just individual acts of justice that bring God's kingdom, but also seeing real kind of systemic change is also a really important part of our faith, and speaking up and being in the political space. I think I would have been a bit scared of doing that before this year, but actually I think a lot of what I've seen over this year has been really amazing, faithful Christians standing up and speaking out on political issues and not being afraid to allow faith to speak into those spaces. So I think that's been really a powerful thing for me, because I maybe wouldn't have taken my faith to a protest before, but I feel like I can now.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hazel. Really appreciate all that you do and all that you bring to the role, and for answering so honestly as well. And if people do have further questions they want to ask Hazel about what her experience has been, you're more than welcome to do that in the Q&A. I see there's loads of questions have been coming in about various topics, which we'll get to in the next half an hour or so. So that will be great. Thank you so much, Hazel. I'm going to pass over to Simeon now, who's going to take us to the next part of our programme.
Thank you very much, Rue. And I am welcoming back to the screen Alfie and Hannah, second Hannah you've seen this evening. Alfie and Hannah both have a similar role, but they're different in significant ways. So Alfie and Hannah are parliamentary interns. And I wonder, Hannah, if I can ask you just to share with people, how does your role differ from what we just heard about from Hazel?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, well, I mean, to start with, the biggest difference is that Hazel is with JPIT for 5 days a week, and me and Alfie are only with JPIT 2.5 days because we spend the other 2.5 working with an MP in Parliament. So at the moment, we spend Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons in Parliament, and Wednesday morning, Thursday and Friday working with JPIT. Personally, I really like this structure because it helps you to really see those links between faith and politics in such a practical way, having the privilege of actually being in and working in Parliament, but also engaging with Parliament on the campaigning side. So yeah, just getting to experience those two different but great opportunities.
Good. And Alfie, could you say a bit about what kind of tasks you get involved in working with an MP?
Yeah, so me and Hannah do slightly different things, but overall the themes are kind of the same. So we're effectively a parliamentary assistant. Would kind of be our title if we weren't on the internship. So we kind of help responding to questions and letters that are written in from the MP's constituents. So respond to them on the MP's behalf. We work on briefings. So I work on briefings for my MP on various issues that they might be talking about or be interested in. So doing research on things like that. And we attend things kind of alongside our MP. So we go to events and meetings with them, but also sometimes in their place. To kind of meet with constituents or to go to various events that are happening in Parliament. There's a lot going on in Parliament, and MPs have, I think, bigger teams than people sometimes realise. So we're one in a team of maybe 5 or 6, kind of helping them do their day-to-day work.
Good. And Hannah, that's you've effectively got 2 jobs going on, 2 part-time jobs that fit together. How do they relate in your head and in your experience? Are there benefits to doing these 2 different pieces of work as part of the same internship?
Yeah, definitely. I think it really hit me a few weeks ago when JPIT had a campaign relating to the illegal migration bill, and we were encouraging people to email their MP about it. And then I saw in Kat's policy inbox some people were sending her JPIT statement on the refugee bill and asking for her to do the actions that we wanted people to do. So I think you do sometimes see it in those really practical ways of people engaging with JPIT's campaigning materials and trying to influence politics in those very practical ways. So you can really sort of see the effectiveness and follow them through. I think that then engaging in politics through Kat's way then helps me to, in my JPIT role, to see what kind of engagement is effective when you're designing campaigns. You have a bit of a better idea about what sort of thing an MP is likely to respond to and what actual power they have to do these things.
Good, thank you. And Alfie, have you got anything to add about how you found the 2 parts of the role connect?
Yeah, so the work we do is kind of distinct and set apart. So we do stuff in Parliament that is confidential to Parliament, and we do stuff in the JPIT team that's confidential to the JPIT team. But there's definitely an overlap of skills. Research is very similar on both sides. But again, like Hannah was saying, you'll be working on one side, working on a campaign, the publicity side on JPIT work, and then on the other side in politics in Westminster, kind of seeing the nitty-gritty of how that politics happens in Parliament, and also how constituents and people are responding to that information. So yeah, that's really interesting.
And you perhaps wouldn't acknowledge this, but I think we've within the JPIT team have come to depend upon our parliamentary interns as our sort of insiders to tell us a bit about how things work. and even on a practical level, help us to book rooms for events that we want to hold in Parliament and all that kind of stuff as well. So you become our sort of in-house parliamentary experts for the team as well as part of this, which is a really useful role for the team. I imagine that being in Parliament brings lots of exciting experiences. Would either of you like to share any of your kind of favourite things that you have done over this year in Parliament?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate to give some great tours to some really interesting people, friends, but also people who work with the MP or who are constituents, and get to show them around Parliament. And it is a really phenomenal building, and to kind of walk through and talk about the history of this place that's been the representation of democracy for so long does get me really excited. There's a beautiful chapel in Parliament, just underground, that's really old, and it's really lovely to kind of go down there with people and kind of share this history, but also see the part that faith has played in Parliament throughout all those years has been really exciting. And Parliament's great, but the JPIT team is great too. It's a really amazing group of people, and Hazel said this, but we really don't just make coffee. In fact, I don't actually think I've made a coffee or tea this year. So we've really been thrown in, and we get to experience so many amazing opportunities and work on loads of campaigns that in a team that's really passionate about it, both in Parliament but also in the JPIT team.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, like Alfie said, it's just such a privilege really to work in Parliament. I think I've never been so politically informed in my life. I've always cared about politics, but I feel like I actually really know what's going on now. They have these TV screens all over Parliament with live footage of what's happening in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So it's sort of impossible to not know what's going on politically all the time. And it's just really nice to actually feel like you understand what's happening and what's going on. And like Alfie and Hazel have said, just the variety that every day there's something new and exciting happening that you can get involved in is really great.
Good, thank you. Well, hopefully hearing all this from Hazel and Alfie and Hannah has kind of whetted your appetite and made you even more excited than you maybe already were about the idea of applying for the internship. Just a reminder, we've got the Q&A function, so if you've got any questions that you want to ask anyone here, then do pop them into that, and we will try and get through as many as we can by the end of our time. In a moment, I'm going to hand on to the other Hannah, who is going to start to talk us through the application process and how that works. So thank you, Hannah and Alfie, for now.
Thank you, Simeon. So we've heard a little bit about what the roles include if you kind of find yourself ending up with us in the team in September, but we're going to talk a little bit now about the process between now and then, kind of how you get there and the application process itself. So I'll just invite Rue back onto the screen to join us as well. And Rue, Simeon and I are just going to have a conversation about the application process itself and really what we're looking for in a strong application. So just as a brief overview, some of this you'll have picked up through the information online, but the application for each of the internships takes the form of an initial online application form from which the panel will shortlist a small number of people to come to an interview. Those interviews will take place in person, and we'll talk a little bit more in a bit about what they will look like. But that application form itself has 3 questions on it. And we wanted to spend a bit of time now looking at each of those questions and just talking to each other about what it is we're looking for, or what we were looking to hear from applicants through those questions. And we really want to emphasize that it's not a trick question. We've really tried to form these application forms as a way of really finding out more about you, who you are, what you're interested in, how you think this opportunity would benefit you. So we're not kind of there's not a perfect answer that we're looking for here. It's not like we've already know what we're looking for, but we hope that they are open questions that enable you to share a bit about yourself and your experiences. So we'll just take each of the questions in turn. So the first question on the application form is, tell us about a change you would like to see in the world and why. Simeon, start us off. What is it we're looking for through that question?
Well, I think it's going to hopefully tell us a few different things about you as you write your answer to that. One is just kind of a bit about who you are, where you're coming from, what your passions are, and what your faith is, and how that inspires you as well. So I think we'll also be looking for more specifically about your understanding of and your commitment to issues of justice in the world, and maybe your engagement with politics and your thinking about politics, and really importantly, your ability to communicate about those issues and your passions and why you think this issue is important. So we want to be persuaded by you that that this is an important thing, because that's a really key part of our work as a team, is persuading people about the importance of different issues. So it's a chance for you to have a go at that, as well as us learning a lot more about who you are and where you're coming from.
Yeah, I would really, before I start answering the question, I would really consider and dig deep into myself. I would want to think about what are the key things which fire me up, just as Simeon's been saying, the things that I'm really passionate about, maybe things that I've already been doing, things that I've already got experience of, changes, maybe small changes even that I've seen or been a witness of, or I've tried to influence or I've tried to affect, and then expand on that. Because coming from a place of experience, you will be able to give us a much fuller, more impressive answer, I guess, because actually you're coming from a position of someone who's been there, who understands the issue maybe. It's more difficult to think of something which is quite abstract and something, you know, when the question has the word a change in the world, it's like, oh, that's a really big thing, you know, that's a very complicated thing to try and put into 350 words on an application form. But actually, I'm sure all of you who are interested in this role have been changing your world already. You have been doing things. There are things that you've been fired up about. Tell us about that, and tell us how you would love that to continue, how you'd love that to influence more people and to grow as well. Come from a place of passion, come from a place of your experience, and I think that will really communicate much more to us than just some sort of abstract paragraph about something that you saw on the news. You know, really give us more, and that will really help your answer, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the kind of subtitle to the question, I suppose it says in the application form, this could include reflections on your faith, your lived experience, or academic studies. So there might be a number of ways that you've encountered the issue that you care about, or the change you want to see in the world. And we'd love to hear about why it matters to you, rather than just why it matters to the world. I think is an important part of this. And it's worth us remembering that kind of in each of these questions, we're trying to link your answers to how well we see you fitting the person specification that comes with the role. So you'll have seen on the application page, there's a document you can download, which is the job description and person specification. And that's just an outline of the kind of qualities we're looking for in somebody who might do this role well. And the really important thing is to remember is that's like the kind of ideal situation. If you don't necessarily think, oh, I'm a bit worried I don't meet all of those perfectly, that shouldn't put you off. But this is an opportunity for you to share with us some of how you do feel like you meet some of those criteria, or what you think you'd bring, including those interests and passions. And part of those, the aspect on that person specification is being able to demonstrate an interest in areas of justice and peace. And this is really, that first question is your chance to tell us what your interests are, what your passions are. And how you kind of bring that to the team.
It's perhaps worth saying at this point, Hannah, that this is not just a job from our point of view. This is a development opportunity. So we're looking as much for potential as we are for experience and having done this kind of thing exactly before. So don't look at the person specification and think, gosh, I've not done all of those things. I can't necessarily tick all of those boxes. Show you're interested, show that you've started to work on some of those areas, and that will really help you in your application too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that feeds into the second question that's on the application form, which asks, what skills and experiences would you bring to this role? And this one's got a few more words for you to answer in. It's a 500 or up to 500 words to answer that question in. Rue, what are we looking for there? Start us off on kind of what that question's trying to ask and address.
Okay, I'm gonna let everyone into a little bit of the background to how we will actually be looking at the papers as well for this, because I think that's really helpful. So Hannah and I and a few other people as well will be looking at your applications, and we have to do this in the fairest way we can. And the fairest way that we can do this is to have a very structured set of questions and to expect a structured set of answers from you as well. And we score what you are saying, not in kind of like, oh, I liked what they were reading, or I liked what they wrote. It was brilliant. It was very nicely written. All the punctuation was right and the spelling was right. Those are all good things. But actually, that won't really influence our score. What will influence our score is, did you give us a really good bit of evidence? Can you relate something from your own life that really demonstrates that you have that skill or you have that ability? If you can give us 2 examples, and that can just be a sentence, it doesn't have to be a long drawn out explanation, even just in a sentence, can you give us 2 bits of evidence that you have that skill or ability? And then we can score that. That's how we actually will score it. There might be someone who wants to apply and they're not quite sure what they need to write. My advice is look very carefully at what we've given you as what we're expecting, and then try and come up with something from your own personal experience that relates to that you can put into a sentence. When you've got all those sentences, try and then put them into the 500 words in a way which makes sense and which reads nicely. Ask someone else to read it for you, read it with you as well, just to support you in that. We're not trying to trick anyone. We're not trying to make it difficult. We're actually just trying to make it really easy for us to fairly compare lots of different people who are bringing lots of different things. And as someone's already said, don't panic if you can't think of something for one of the skills or abilities, because actually I don't think anyone will ever be able to offer all of those things all at once. I'm not sure that any of us can. There's a big list there, but you will be able to offer something that no one else can. So make sure that we actually know about it. And the only way we'll know about it is if you write it down on the script. So that's my biggest advice to you in answering that question.
Absolutely. And one of the things to emphasize in that as well is that those examples can come from any aspect of your life. That might be voluntary experience you've had, that might be academic experience you've had, or a personal experience that you've had. And really, an example is really helpful. So one of the things we look for is evidence that you've done that. So not just saying, I am good at teamwork, but giving us an example of how we would know that you're good at teamwork, or that you've experienced that before. And yeah, we'd really encourage you to say it doesn't have to be professional experience that you draw on there. These roles are for people right at the start of their working lives. So we don't expect that you've had loads of jobs where you've done all of these things before. They can come from any aspect of your life that you think is relevant and demonstrates that you meet those criteria. Is there anything you wanted to add to that one, Simeon?
I think so. You covered that really well.
Super. So the third and final question on the application form is another 350-word question. And it's, how do you see this experience benefiting your growth and development? And that's a question that really encourages one of the things we've already said, which is that this opportunity is about a development opportunity. We're not expecting somebody, like Rue says, to come and tick all of the boxes, because if you could do that at the beginning of the year, then what's the opportunity for kind of growth and development? So to both of you now, Rue and Simeon, what is it that we're looking for from that final question?
For me, I'm really interested to know what people want to learn through this experience, and that will help us to assess whether you're going to get from the experience what you might be hoping for. Where do you want to go to in life? Do you have a sense of where you want to go to, and what are the kind of things that will help you get there? And this is the chance for you to again help us get to know you on this form. And then that will help us to make the best judgment about whether this is a really good fit for you.
I think, yeah, that's great. Some people will think about short term. They might think about where they are right now, maybe their spiritual walk, their faith journey. They might think about how this would be part of that walk. Some people might want to think about, well, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do maybe as a career or for a job after this? This might prepare them for that and help them to step into that role. And some people might come saying, actually, I don't really know. Maybe I just feel a sense that this might be something which would benefit me. And tell us about that. If that's your experience as well, I think that's perfectly acceptable. But you might start to think, well, maybe I would like to know what I want to do with the rest of my life, or I think I have a gifting in this area, or I think I have an interest in this area, and I'd love to test that and try that. This is a brilliant place in which you can do that. We think we're a very supportive and encouraging group of people who just want to see people succeed. And so we'll be choosing people who we think have the most potential, not just to help us, but actually people that we can give something back to and support them and enable them on their journeys. We have interns every year, and they go off and they've all done a multitude of different things with their lives, and it's really exciting to see. There is not one ideal candidate that looks the same as everyone else. Everyone we've had is very different. They go and do different things. They grow in different ways. We just try and provide a really good environment for them and a safe environment for them to do that, a challenging environment in which they discover new skills and they're pushed into areas perhaps they haven't done before. If you're someone who's up for that kind of challenge and that kind of growth, tell us about it in your answer, because that would be really encouraging and helpful for us to know who are the people who will get the most out of this, because those are the people we really want to be in the role.
Thank you, Rue. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really, really important for us to emphasize. This is really a process for us to get to know you better, and that growth and development opportunity is a really big part of that. So just a reminder that it's really important throughout the application that what we're looking for is evidence of how you meet the person specification that comes with the job description. So do download that document from the application page and take a careful look at it as you prepare how you'd like to answer the question.
Well, there's a couple of questions in the chat. I wonder if we might pick up at this point because they seem relevant. People are asking about whether they can apply if they're abroad at the moment. I think the answer is yes, you can apply from anywhere, but you'd need to have the right to work in the UK to do this job. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So to apply for or to be in the role, you need the right to work in the UK, and you need to already hold that. The Methodist Church isn't open to kind of supporting a visa, a work visa for this particular role. So you already need to have the right to work in the UK before you apply. And unfortunately, if you don't have that, there's a question on that application form, and we won't be able to consider your application. But it's also important to say that because the roles are hybrid, and perhaps this touched on some of the other questions in the chat as well, that you are expected to be in London for in-person meetings on a regular basis. So even if you don't live within the Greater London kind of boundary, you are expected to attend in-person meetings, which is why the role is advertised as hybrid. So it wouldn't necessarily be suitable to do the role from abroad, as well as that kind of right to work in the UK being necessary.
We had someone who had a similar question, but I think they were talking about being somewhere in the UK and wanting to do the role and asking if we could provide travel expenses. And I think the answer there is we wouldn't do travel expenses into your place of work. Of course, if you're traveling around the country doing JPIT work, we've got Hazel going up to York. We cover those sort of things. But for you just on your regular week-to-week work coming into the office, we wouldn't cover that expense. Unfortunately, that would be down to you to do that. Most of the people who are interns live within the Greater London area for the year. Maybe they've never been to London before, maybe they've lived close to that before, but you do need to be based a commutable distance so that you can take part in the in-person meetings that we have that are focused in London. So that might exclude some people, unfortunately, if they can't be available to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's worth kind of really practically emphasising that the salary advertised with the job includes a London weighting, and that London weighting is granted by the Methodist Church if you meet the hybrid working criteria. So if you are working in the office 2 or more days of the week, we have a different kind of contract for somebody who's completely home-based, so who isn't meeting that minimum criteria of 2 days in the office per week, and that would not include a London weighting. So if you were traveling in and out, that the salary would kind of be presumed to cover that. I'd say at this stage, if there are accessibility requirements that mean that you cannot be based in the office, don't let that put you off from putting in an application form. That's a conversation we'd like to have with you if you're shortlisted. So if there's a reason you'd need to be home-based for this role, that would be a conversation that we would have if you reached interview stage, but don't let that put you off from applying in the first place.
We have another question that I was delighted to see. Absolutely love this question. I'm not sure what the current or historical diversity makeup of the team is or has been, but do you welcome Black, queer, and neurodiverse candidates? I think we can all emphatically say together, yes, absolutely. You would be incredibly welcome. And we've had people who've been in all of those categories before on team, and you're so welcome. And we would love to have more representation from some of those communities as well, which it's just great. So if you're interested in applying and you are worried that you might be excluded because of your gender, sexuality, or your race, or anything else, please lay that to the side if you can, because we are arms open, ready to accept people who want to just come and work with us. We'd be delighted for you to apply. So don't feel that there's any barriers at all in that way that would exclude you from applying or being part of our team.
And another great question on there is what sort of qualities stand out to you, those who will be shortlisting? Do you want to say any more than you've said already about what qualities would stand out for you on an application?
I think, as Rue said already, in the interest of fairness, but also in helping us to kind of work through the applications, we do score against the person specification. And so those really are the qualities that we're looking for. There's not kind of a hidden list of, oh, I'd really like for that person to have like done this kind of voluntary experience and that's going to get extra ticks in the box from me. Those really are the qualities that we're looking for. And they include everything from really practical stuff, like you might have had experience of doing a particular kind of project or role or task, to being enthusiastic. Like one of the qualities on the person specification is enthusiastic and willing to take on new challenges. So actually, if you can really demonstrate to us that you're not just kind of equipped to carry out tasks, but you're sharing some of your excitement, your passion, your enthusiasm, that really helps. So not just including things in your application form that says I did this, but to say I really enjoyed this aspect of doing that role, or I feel like I really benefited from that opportunity. Sharing with us that reflectiveness on how you've grown and developed will help us to see how you meet some of those criteria that are as much about kind of who you are as a person, as well as kind of what tasks you might be carrying out. Is there anything you'd add to that, Rue?
No, absolutely. I mean, in fairness, all the things are on the information that we give. Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to add any more, except we want people who are able to learn and grow. So that we would love that to be featuring on your application as well. Can you be someone who is loving learning, loving? Those are the kind of people that we want to support and help to flourish.
Super. Thank you both for answering some of those questions. We've just got some really practical things to share before perhaps we invite the others, the current interns, back on screen to answer any final questions you've got. So now is your chance to put any last remaining questions that you've got in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those, and we'll answer some that we haven't answered yet that are already in there. But just to kind of talk a little bit about what happens after you've put your application in. So you'll fill out the form with those 3 questions on that we've just talked a little bit about. And if you are shortlisted for an interview, you'll be contacted 1 week before the interview date by email. The interviews are scheduled to take place on Tuesday the 6th of June. It's not a Thursday, it's a Tuesday, the 6th of June. And they're going to be in person in London in our office in Westminster. So pencil in that date in your diary in the hope that you'll get an interview, and perhaps you can keep that free to come and join us for an interview if you're offered that. The interview day will involve a 45-minute interview with a panel, where we'll ask you some questions to find out a little bit more about you. And you'll also be asked to prepare a short presentation in advance, and the details of that will be sent out with your interview offer. And during the day, there'll also be a written assessment for you to carry out, where you'll be provided with that question and that task on the day as well. And we'll look at all of those things, your application, your interview, and your written assessment, as part of how we assess who the right candidate might be. And so if you're contacted for an interview, that will be a week in advance of the interview days, a week in advance of Tuesday, the 6th of June. And all the practicalities will be arranged with our HR team at the Methodist Church. So if I can just bring our current interns back onto screen, if they're still kind of loitering in the background of the Zoom, there we go. And we'll answer any final questions that you've got, so do put those in the Q&A. And just as we answer the last few, just perhaps to each be thinking about if there's one last thing you'd want to share or one last encouragement you'd want to share to people watching, perhaps we'll share those as we wrap up in a minute. I think the question that we haven't answered in the Q&A so far is about somebody who's on a placement year and their university course, and whether you can apply for the internship as a placement year student. It's not an essential criteria for you to have completed a degree level qualification for the internship, but there are some other criteria that you're expected to meet. So the internship's offered for people who are aged between 21 and 30. So that would be a criteria that you'd need to meet. But it's also demonstrating a kind of a level of work that and degree level qualification or equivalent is a desirable criteria. So I think what I'd really encourage you to do if you're thinking about applying is to make sure that you're demonstrating how you're meeting the criteria, even if you haven't perhaps finished your degree studies yet, and to make sure that you're meeting that kind of age bracket criteria as well. We haven't had a placement year student before, and that's partly because we've just changed the specification this year so that you don't have to have a degree to do the internship. So if you've got any further questions about that, I'd encourage you just to email the inquiries email address. And if there's a conversation you'd like to have with our HR department about how that might work and any additional requirements that you might have as a placement year student, whether there are requirements from your university, just to get in touch with us, and we'll pass that on to our HR department and we can work those things through with you if you're thinking about applying. Super. Okay, I don't think we've got any other questions. I think if you've had a question that we haven't answered that's not specifically about the internships, do get in touch with us by email. We're only able to answer questions this evening about the internships. So if we haven't answered your question, that might be why. So brilliant. To wrap us up then, let's just go around each of you, perhaps starting with our current interns. What piece of encouragement or advice would you have for people watching who are thinking about applying? Should we start with you, Alfie?
Yeah, sure. I've got a couple of things actually. Just a quick one on the hybrid stuff. The work in Parliament isn't usually hybrid. Me and Hannah are normally in person those 3 days, partly because it's a great place to be, but also partly because of the way work with an MP is structured. It's a lot easier to do in person. So I just thought I'd mention that. And I thought I'd also add that you don't necessarily need to be a member of the party that you're applying for the role of. My piece of encouragement would just be that the team are great. And if you are, if you do manage to get to an interview, you will be nervous, but they really try hard to make you look good in that interview. Like they've said so many times, they're not trying to catch you out. They're not looking for that aha moment. They're trying to let you shine. And I really enjoyed the interview process because I felt I came out of it feeling like, oh, actually, I do know some of these things. I can explain why I'm good at this thing or why I care about this thing. So I just encourage you that, apply. Yeah, it was a really positive experience for me, even if I hadn't have got the job.
Thank you, Alfie. Hazel, what would your piece of advice be?
I think, just don't be afraid of the things that you think might be holding you back from the role, but just make the commitment and give it a go. Just give it a try. I think I remember reading like the job specification for this role and being like, oh, I don't fulfill all of these things, or there might be issues with me being able to get into work for that day, or just those issues, whilst they might be relevant to how you might do the job, should not be a barrier to applying. And I think so if you're at all interested, I think just give it a go, and don't be worried about the things that you might yeah, you might think you don't have, that other people might be aware of the fact that you will bring lots of things to the table, even if you're not quite sure what they are yet, you will.
Thank you, Hazel. Hannah, what's your encouragement?
Yeah, just to go for it, really, if you're thinking about applying. I've enjoyed this role so much. As Alfie said, the JPIT team are all really great, and especially for the parliamentary internships, it can be so difficult to get into Parliament, to find a role there, and it's so important that we do have more young people from different backgrounds and people of faith going into Parliament and trying to have a heart for social justice in there. So really just encourage you to apply for it, and like Hazel said, just don't be afraid to be yourself on the application. I think the team really do want to help you grow, and it doesn't matter if you're not quite there yet, because you see throughout the year how much you can improve.
Thanks, Hannah. Just before I come to Ru and Simeon, we've just had one last quick question in the Q&A about whether you can apply for multiple roles. The answer is yes. All 3 of the roles are advertised separately. So the JPIT internship, the JPIT and Conservative House of Commons intern, the JPIT and Labour House of Commons intern. We're hoping to open up those parliamentary internships for applications soon. So it's just worth being aware that the processes will be slightly out of sync. So the interviews for the JPIT internship will be before those for the parliamentary internship, but there's no reason why you couldn't apply to more than one, and perhaps you just have to think about if you're offered one, which would you most like to do. Ru, your last comments.
3 words: just be you. That's what we want to see. Thank
you, Ru. And Simeon, wrap us up. What's your final encouragement?
Well, they are brilliant opportunities and brilliant jobs, and I suppose the other reflection I would have is it's a real privilege to find a role for me where I can live out my faith and try and change the world in positive ways. And there's not many places you get to do that. So I really hope you will feel encouraged to apply, and that best of luck with your applications too.
Super. Thank you everyone for your input this evening, and we are grateful for you all spending a bit of time to come and hear about the internships and being interested in applying. And just a reminder that if you've got any questions after this evening's webinar, that you can email us at inquiries@jpit.uk. The deadline for applying for the JPIT internship is the 22nd of May, the end of the day on the 22nd of May. So make sure you've got your application in before then. And we look forward to meeting some of you at the interview stage. Thank you very much.